In this video, I want to talk about error processing. What happens if somebody sends you an XML file that is not valid according to your schema? Okay, so this is the diagram we've been using. Let's add a couple little things over here. So somebody could actually drop in either a flat file or an XML file. So if they drop an XML file, it's going to follow this path down here. It's going to pull on star.xml. It's going to go through the default pipeline, and that means it's already a standard PO. And if it's a standard PO, then it won't have any map, and it will go straight on through. If we receive a text file, it'll go down this path, and it will run the pipeline to turn it into XML, and then it will map it, and then we'll have a standard PO. So just to confirm this, we're going to go back and run a quick test where we drop an XML file in our map-in directory. So I've cleared out our map-out directory, so it's empty. I'm going to go to the map-in, and then over here I want to go get my standard PO file. So it's called standard PO instance 1. Let's copy it. Go to hat and make sure that it ran. Okay, the time is 3:10, and so yes, it ran correctly. Okay, so now what I wanted to show you here is what if the file has bad data in it. So there's two possibilities. Number one, what if it's totally not well formed? So let's copy this and call it not good XML. And then let's copy it again and let's call this second one not valid according to the schema. Okay, so we're going to take the one that's called not good XML, and we're going to come in here and we're actually just going to kind of mess it up. So one way you could mess it up is the closing tag. Let's say we just don't even have a closing tag. So we take the closing tag off and we'll put a note here, no closing tag here. Okay, and now we're going to drop this file through and see what happens to it, called the not good XML. Because the philosophy I'm trying to teach here is you have to know how to handle the errors that can come up with BizTalk. Okay, so it's 3:12. We did get an error, and if we open it in message flow, it's going to tell you there was a failure executing the receive pipeline. So the pipeline in this case says I'm looking for an XML file, and if you don't really pass an XML file, well then you shouldn't be using the XML pipeline. So what it's basically telling you is I can't read this file, it's not XML. It says unexpected end of file has occurred, the following elements are not closed. And so that's a pretty good error message telling you that your XML is not well formed. Now in a few minutes we'll learn how to trap that error and let you do special processing for it. But now let's look at what happens when you send a file that is not valid according to the schema. So what we need to do here is we need to have well-formed XML, but maybe we need to have a missing element or something like that that's not in the schema. Or here, for instance, price. What if we put the price as ABC? Okay, we know that price is probably supposed to be a decimal, and the schema says it's a decimal. So if we put a non-decimal value there, we would expect to get some type of error. So we copy that in, go to hat, and at 3:13, what happened? It received the file and it actually processed it. And this is probably not what you were expecting. To me, this is what do you call it, non-intuitive nature. One would think that BizTalk would validate the schema, wouldn't one? But it doesn't. So it actually read your file, it actually ran the map, and it actually sent the two files. So if we were to go look at our output directory now and find the file that's the later of the two dates, and we try to open it in the browser, see, it actually has the bad price there. So if you were passing this to a web service or maybe a C# program to store this data in a database, it's probably going to bomb on this not being a numeric field. So the question is, how can we trap this with BizTalk and then handle it a better way? So we're actually going to deal with this problem first before we deal with the not well formed problem. So we're going to go back to our Visual Studio. Let's close all the windows I have open here. Okay, so I went offline, I closed all these windows, and now I want to open, actually we're going to have to make a new pipeline for this. So the moral of the story is, if you want to validate that your data coming in is good, you need to have your own pipeline. So far, all the pipelines we've created have been in the PO generated schemas. In this case, the pipeline that the schema that we're working with is right here called standard PO. So I think in this case, if I didn't create a separate project for all the pipelines, in that case I would put the pipeline in the same project with the schema. So that's a preference you'll have to decide within your organization how you want to do it. So we're going to create a new pipeline. It's going to be a receive, and this will be the standard PO. What do we call it again? Standard, let's spell it out. Purchase order. And let's call it validation, because this is going to be a validation pipeline. Now all the pipelines we've done up till now have always had the disassembler here, because we were taking a flat file and disassembling it into XML. In the case of this pipeline, what we want to do is take the XML validator and put here. And then you go to the properties for the XML validator, and it says here's a list of schemas that I consider valid. And it is a collection, which means you can have more than one. So when you click the ... you're going to get a list of all the schemas in your projects, and you're going to pick the ones that you want to validate. So for right now, that's the only one that's coming in that we really need to validate. So I'll click OK, and then we basically save the pipeline. And then once again, we will build and deploy the project. So I'll just come up here and right-click Deploy Solution, and I'll go offline while I do that. Okay, so the deploy was successful. Now, how do we implement this? We have to go back to our map in, which would be our receive locations. And in our map in, we have two. We have the flat file, and then notice this one was the one's XML and one's .text. So just to make this more plain, I actually want to change this to XML in. And the pipeline, instead of using XML receive now, we want to pick our new pipeline. And notice our new pipeline is not here because I did not refresh. So I have to click OK. Ooh, and that's another thing that happens when you don't refresh. A concurrency violation is to keep two people from updating the same data at the same time from two different places. And so I'm going to have to hit cancel. Then you come over here and refresh. And then you'll be able to make the change. So now we look for the pipeline, and it's called here Standard P Purchase Order Validation. And maybe we should have put XML on there as well, just to make it clear. And we're going to update that. And since we did a deploy, we have to boot or restart our host instance. Now we're going to go back. Let's delete our map outs over here. I'm going to go to map in, and we're going to copy our not valid XML file from over here to over here. Then we go to hat, refresh, and you see now we have an error. So remember at 3:13 when we ran this, we did not get an error, and now at 3:19 we did get an error. And so what does the error say? It says the message engine failed to process a message submitted in this directory. The published message cannot be routed because no subscribers were found. This error occurs if the subscribing orchestration or SYN port has not been enlisted, or if some of the message properties necessary have not been promoted. Okay, that wasn't exactly the message I was looking for, but at least it is an error that stopped it from running. So just to see if we have the same message in the event viewer, we're going to go back to BizTalk admin, go to the application event viewer, and just a quick note here is when you cycle the BizTalk host, you'll see these information messages, and then above that is everything that's happened since then. And we have two messages. The first one says there are no subscribers, basically. And then the next message says something that looks like a little different. Is suspended. No, it's about the same thing. Could not be routed because no subscribers were found. Okay, so I went back to do my research to figure out why this is error, giving me the wrong error. And lo and behold, in my schema, price is a string. Okay, so to really make this be an error now, we have to change the price to be a decimal so that we will force the error that I thought we were going to get. So I'm going to save that schema and I'm going to redeploy and retest. So the deploy was successful. I need to restart the host. I don't have to change anything on my ports. And then we will drop the file again called the not valid schema. We'll go to hat. And now we'll see if we got a better error message this time. Okay, much better error. So now it says, reason, the price attribute has an invalid value according to its data type. So in other words, your data types aren't matching. And so BizTalk basically saw, because of the pipeline, it ran the validation and it said your data doesn't match your schema, so I'm going to throw an error. So in this video we've seen two things: how to trap an error when the data doesn't match your schema, and then we also saw that you'll get an error when you throw in a file that's not well formed. So in this case we're actually getting errors, but we're not trapping the errors. In the second video of this part B, we will show you how to actually grab these errors and let BizTalk handle them a special way.